All right. Here we are, Koopa.
Hello, Gabby.
So excited to be here. This is my first podcast with Let's Do Podcasts. So excited. Thank you guys for hosting. I'm delighted to introduce my very, 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 very good friend, Cooper Sims West. My name is Gabriella Espinoza. Spirit Meets Soil is technically the name of my podcast. We'll see if that changes, but we're going to go with the flow right now.
Yes.
So Cooper.
Yes, Gabby.
And I met. We met at Naropa, and he was probably the most obnoxious TA I ever had.
Cheers.
So salud to that. But I would like to say Cooper is probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my entire life. So
Ooh.
I don't know. I'm serious. You were brilliant. And I would say you touch many different worlds.
Yep.
So would you like to maybe talk a little bit about that and what you're doing?
Sure.
How you've,
Yeah. So like Gabby said, we met at Naropa. At that moment, I was working on my Master of Divinity so that I could go and be a chaplain. But when we met, I was helping Dr. Amelia Hall teach second turning.
Foundations of Buddhism.
Yeah, it was a Buddhist course. Yeah, like a sort of a Buddhist overview course. So we covered everything from, the foundational Buddhism, the first turning, all the way to Vajrayana, which was a really fun course. And then I went on and finished my degree. And so now I work at a couple of hospitals, although I actually just resigned from St. Anthony. So I will be doing my last night there Christmas Eve and then going full time at Denver
Amen.
Health. Yeah, I'm very excited. And I guess as far as my spiritual path goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm lay ordained in the Zen Buddhist tradition. Under Zenki Roshi in the Soto Zen lineage of Shunryu Suzuki, for those of you who care about lineage. And I'm also a Sufi student of Nathanael Miles Epes in the lineage of Hazrat Anaya Khan in the Inayati Maimuni order. So there you go. I'm a chaplain and a Zen practitioner and a Sufi.
A Sufi.
Yeah, I do a lot of things.
Yeah, we do it. So I love that. I love it. And I called Cooper up because I really wanted to talk about dependent origination. And I really wanted to make it digestible, palpable, but also provide some context around what that is and what that looks like. So my intention here is to really open the door to foundational Buddhism and make it accessible and do it via this teaching, which is pretty much the entire essence of Buddhism in the first place.
Kind of,
Foundationally. So I guess I'm just curious, I can break down my own interpretation of dependent origination, but having so many different, fingers and toes and hands, you have your foot in every single door in terms of having that understanding. So I'm curious what you would have to say about dependent origination in terms of breaking it down.
I think, sometimes it can get really complex and heady. And in the way of my teacher, my Sufi teacher, Nathanael, I'm always trying to bring things back to a lived experience and to real life. And so for me, when I really started to understand dependent origination, it wasn't studying the causal links. It wasn't studying the 12 Nidanas. It was on a meditation retreat. And this was a weird meditation retreat. So Gabby, do you know about the Zen Center's Wild Dharma?
Is that in Cresta?
Kind of. So Wild Dharma is every year, although I think they didn't do it this year because we were getting the new space kind of set up in the mountain. But every year Zenki takes some students out into the wilderness, and we have a trained wilderness guide, and we hike and camp for a week. But we're also doing sesshin while we're out in the wild.
It's like a backpacking sesshin.
Yeah, backpacking sesshin. And so sesshin is the traditional Zen intensive meditation period. You're meditating all day. You're taking all your meals in the zendo. So this is taking that concept and putting it in the wild. So we were up in the Sangre de Cristo mountains. and we're backpacking for a week. So we're carrying all of our food and all of the gear to
Right.
make our food on our backs, right? And then we're chanting before every meal. And I brought the chant with me, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, but at breakfast, it starts, "This morning meal comes through the efforts of all beings, past and present, and gives us the 10 strengths of complete practice." And then for lunch and dinner, we say, "Innumerable labors brought us this food. Know how it comes to us." And that took on all, like, those chants are beautiful and have a lot of meaning, but they took on a whole new meaning for me when I was literally carrying lunch on my back and watching the Tenzo, the cook it, right? And so you start thinking, okay, what are our innumerable labors? What are all beings past and present when it comes to this food in front of me? Right? It's the soil and the worms and the bugs who prepared that soil. It's the seed. It's the, right, like a corn seed, you know? It's all the farmhands who worked that land for generations, and the indigenous people before that. It's the farmer and his workers who got the crop this season. It's the guy who packaged it and put it on a truck.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
It's the person at the supermarket stocking the shelf. And so when we start talking about, to me, dependent origination, it's like, especially with my food, I think there's no way for this food to appear in front of me without so many hands and beings and labors.
Yeah. And I mean, so in the context of taking that experiential interpretation of it, how I would really synthesize my own understanding of dependent origination is insight that nothing happens independently. Everything arises by certain conditions, because of certain conditions, and together, when they come together, like, these different conditions can shift and can change, and via our own will, our own understanding, and our kind of deconstruction of how these different conditions look in our life. So what does that mean exactly? I mean, if we're talking about the 12 links, because that's how I learned dependent origination, this is ignorance, formation, consciousness, form, sense, like our senses.
Sense organs, yeah.
Contact, feeling, emotional tone, craving, clinging, and then becoming, birth and death. So these are like there's no life without dependent origination. There is no life without suffering, right? And so within this teaching, we have the codex to the rest of the tradition in terms of Buddhism. But what I love about it is, and what I love about the Buddhist tradition in general, is that I can live my life and through experience arrive at these different elements of Buddhism, of dependent origination, by paying enough attention. If I'm just here enough with my experience, seeing how things arise, understanding how things change, and then how they circle back based off of my own notion of self, notion of attachment, notion of craving, then there's like this starts to deconstruct. And so, yeah, it's interesting to have this like super, super intense teaching, right? And then, I don't know, like, and then try to walk with that in the world. Like, I mean, you're a chaplain.
Right.
So Cooper, as he mentioned earlier, he's a chaplain at a hospital. He's seeing people in the worst moments. Yeah. And so taking this teaching and then trying to apply that non-attachment, birth, death, suffering, like all of these things that are kind of proposed in Buddhism a little bit dry. It's a list.
It is.
The Buddha loves lists.
He does. The Buddha is always teaching in lists. You've got, right, like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, the 12 Links of Causation. It's just lists forever.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm curious, like, how do you bring that into your own experience? And I know that, people, I mean, you're not going to go recite, oh, yeah, here are the 12 links. And like, you should think about really attaching to like your mom dying, but for your own internal experience, how does that help to ground you?
It partly it's how I'm showing up and approaching people, right? Knowing that, for example, a few weeks ago, I was working with a patient father of a kid, and they were out here from Kansas. I'm trying to do this without like divulging patient information.
Of course.
Out here from Kansas and to visit university, right? They were on a college tour, and they were driving through Denver to go hang out for the evening, and got rear-ended. You know Denver traffic; it's terrible. Mm-hmm. And he became paralyzed from the waist down.
The father.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. And so how am I going to show up for this guy who came out here expecting to have a nice college visit, spend some time with his family, and now he's paralyzed, right? Like his whole world is changed in one moment. But again, this is dependent origination. Like this is the ugly side, if you will, or just the truthful side, right? Mm-hmm. The causes and conditions on the road that night caused his paraplegia. They had come to a stop because traffic came to a stop. The person behind them wasn't paying attention, so hit them at 30 miles an hour, and that was enough with the car they were driving for him to break his spine. I mean, and then he ended up in the hospital, and I happened to be the one on duty that night.
Totally.
So my experience with this guy is facilitated by a million different happenstantial,
co-originate,
codependent arising moments. But then how am I going to show up for this guy? I'm going to walk into that room and he's the only patient I'm seeing for that moment. The stuff I was dealing with before, it doesn't exist. It's no longer arising. At least not for me. I'm not in that room anymore. And I'm going to sit with him and I'm going to talk to him and I'm going to hold his hand. And then I'm going to go find his wife in the waiting room and let her know, like, hey, we have to intubate him, but he's alive. He says he loves you. He said, he's glad that if anyone was hurt, it's him. Right? I'm gonna go the places she can't and bring the news she can't. And that's the job, I guess, and sort of how it shows up with dependent origination.
Totally. And I'm curious, so I mean, in your own experience of that, I'm sure it's hard to not get attached.
Oh, absolutely.
And so having to reinstate that, and then also having this completely other world of Sufism, because I'm like, where does love fit in dependent origination?
Right. Well, where does love not fit in dependent origination? Right. Everything's a labor of love. Whether or not we think about it that way, whether or not the farmer working on the land thinks about it as a labor of love. I certainly hope he does or she does. And that they love that land and will tend to it in a way that allows the land to continue to be healthy. But in Sufism, love is the way that we try to approach the divine. And this gets really tricky, right? When we're talking about Buddhism and Sufism, what is the divine, yada, yada. But if you can, and Zenki Roshi, my Zen teacher, will say the same thing. If you can be so in love with the world that separation disappears, right? Then you can be more compassionate and more deeply with somebody, and you can let it go when you walk away because you have to be in love with the next moment.
Well, and that's ripping away, right? That's the unconditionality of love.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to explore, have you really experienced love? In alignment with, have you really experienced, aka have you really observed dependent co-arising? If you are observing the arising and the falling, you are in observation of unconditional love, in action, and then in dissolution, in a way, in a sense.
Yeah. And, there's a great Sufi story where he's probably 16, 17, right? He comes to a Sufi teacher and he's like, I really want to be a Sufi. I want to be your student. And the teacher says, have you ever had your heart broken? Have you ever been in love and then, they've gone away and you're shattered and broken into a million pieces? The guy's young and he's like, no. And the Sufi teacher says, come back when you've experienced that. I can't teach you before then. Right? So in this same way, I can't do the job I do. We can't live truly in love with the world until we learn what it means to be shattered.
Absolutely. But in the shattering, that's where the essence of this comes from. In religion in general, you know? And I like to look at the scope of religion and then connect that with this dependent co-origination, right? Because, I mean, taking a more macrocosm look at religion is dependently co-arising. It is co-originated. There are aspects that bleed into each other. And the more I learn, it's like, okay, we're all talking the same thing in a different language with different interpretations. But I mean, how can, I'm now in my own journey, I'm like, how can I deconstruct religion by utilizing this format of interaction and relation, you know? And I'm curious what you have to say about that, especially in an interreligious, interspiritual dialogue context.
At the end of the day, I am also a scholar, right? Like before I was getting my Master of Divinity, I got a Master of Arts in Religious Studies. I have too many master's degrees is really the long and short of that. And so when I look at religion, I'm using Catherine Albanese, a scholar out of, I think, Berkeley. Anyway, Catherine Albanese's definition of religion, which is the 4 C's. So creed, code, cultus, community. Creed, an explanation of why the world is the way it is. So, right, like in Buddhism, dependent origination is an excellent way to look at creed. Code, a way you should behave because of the way the world is. So then we have things like right livelihood, right mindfulness, right action, right? All of these things. And then out of code, you have cultus. And this is kind of a scary sounding word, right? No, cultus means rituals and ritual functionaries, priests, if you will. And then finally, you have community, which is people who agree with the previous 3 things and come together to form a community around those things. So if we're looking at sort of like, how does this fit with dependent origination? Well, you have humans arising and arriving in all of their varied glory. And I mean, yes, I think humans are glorious and stupid and miraculous. Terrible and yes, all the things. And they're like, well, the world is bad. How do I explain that? And they come up with different explanations, right? Everything from dependent origination to original sin. And then they go, okay, well, if the world is bad because of this, how should I behave, right? So one thing is growing out of another. And, if I should behave this way, what are the rituals needed to impact this behavior, right? And who's going to lead these rituals? So it's all, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, and it creates a lot of messiness too. Yeah, I mean, there's attachment around narrative. There's attachment around like, just like all of the mystical sides of religion and superstitious sides of religion. And I guess it has so much weight for so many people, but also then there's this other really interesting interpretation of how we should approach all of it. So, and something I've said before is just like, we have to demystify religion in order to remystify the message. And that's something that I kind of get with dependent origination in a religious context. You told a story. I had a story that I wanted to tell about, what is it? Asaji? Is that how you say it?
I don't know.
Asaji. But he's so he was one of the Buddha's first followers. Okay. Yeah. And basically one of his first disciples, and he's like a little pupil. Like he didn't have like crazy transmissions or anything like that. But he meets Upatissa, who's actually turns into Shariputra. If anybody knows Buddhism, Shariputra.
He's everywhere.
and Cooper has jokes about Shariputra.
I do. I make fun of Shariputra for sure.
But basically this little pupil disciple meets Shariputra and Shariputra's like, this is before he was introduced to the Buddhism. And he's like, well, can you tell me what's going on? You know, he kind of like makes tea for him. He gives him some bread. And he's like, okay, like, who are you? And who's your teacher? Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, Asaji was basically like, I don't have all of the answers, but I do have this synthesis of basically the teachings of the Buddha. And he recites this, basically the essence of dependent origination, which translates to wherever phenomena arises from a cause, their cause, the Tathagata, which is the Buddha, has told. And the same condition basically this is like the condition of arising.
Mm-hmm.
And also their cessation. So it's like that's the great teaching of the ascetic. So this whole line, it synthesizes dependent origination and pretty much the entire foundation for Buddhism as a whole.
Because the Four Noble Truths are in there too.
The Four Noble Truths are synthesized in there. And so I'm like, okay, for somebody who doesn't know Buddhism, for somebody who's just approaching all of this kind of new age talk with not a lot of context, people who are speaking about these traditions that are as well read and are speaking from a place of maybe ignorance or whatever it may be, how can we attune to what is happening here and offer this to people who are coming to this tradition?
Yeah, and I know you did this translation because I'm looking at your notes and I can see that you did, and I think it's a great translation. But if I were going to take this and like give it to a novice, right, somebody who has no experience of Buddhism, I'd want to translate it even further, right? Like, because you're going to use the big word Tathagata and try to, right?
I know,
like, right?
I know.
But it's in the Chan, and I think Tathagata is such a great term for the Buddha, the thus gone one, right? It tells you so much about who the Buddha is and what he is, or was, I suppose. But right, we got to go further. Whatever phenomena arises from causes, okay, that's clear.
It's a cause and effect,
right?
This is a cause and effect.
Exactly. There is no causeless effect, is what Buddhism would say. And if we get into, and I know this is for first turning, so we won't. But if we were to get into Madhyamaka and Nagarjuna's, I'm not even going to try to pronounce
Madhyamaka is a branch of Buddhism in the second turning, second phase of the tradition. Yeah.
But there's huge philosophical texts that work on breaking down this idea of a causeless effect, and also breaking down like even the existence of the effect, because Madhyamaka is it's a mindfuck. It's a mindfuck.
It's a horrible mindfuck.
It's just that was one of my least favorite semesters of the MDiv. It was just like constant. Anyway, can I?
You can see my notes.
Yeah. So right, whatever phenomena arises from a cause, and then that cause that's Tathagata told. So I would go, that cause the Buddha taught or the Buddha explained, right? And the causes, or maybe their causes. I know it's not multiple in the Sanskrit, but for this, I might make it that. And then the same conditionality, and thus teaches the great sage, right? And also their cessation. So, sorry, I'm going to read it the full thing through. Whatever phenomena arises from a cause, their cause that Tathagata told, and also their cessation, thus teaches the great ascetic, right? So we've got we've got all of the Four Noble Truths here, right? We've got life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desire. There is a way to the cessation of that suffering, and that way is the Noble Eightfold Path. So I'd probably make that the Buddha taught, and also he taught the cessation of causes and the cessation of suffering. Thus teaches the great sage or the great rishi. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful.
Well, in the way that I've really interacted with this in my life, it's like, okay, you go through a shitty breakup. Okay, that seems to be like the theme, especially this year. But so you're going through a shitty breakup.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, so there's a shitty guy, shitty situation, whatever. My attachment to the shittiness, right? That is one element of this image that I'm creating, right? Where does that shittiness come from? XYZ experiences. Within those experiences, I either had a contraction or I opened. Like there was some sort of like experiential turning that happened that caused that experience to have some form of attachment.
Sure. And I would add repulsion. Right, because Buddhism says we react
aversion
to things in three different ways. It's either positive, neutral, or negative. So when we get to the eighth length, clinging, there's a flip side of clinging, and that's repulsion. And it's when you act on either of these that you begin to suffer.
Right, and so within these two, within the two, what is it called? Like when you're Anyways, basically we have repulsion, we have attachment, right? You have this image and then you are connecting the dots to create an idea around who a person is, why they're that way, and the story you have with them, the connection you have with them. The way that I've interacted with dependent origination in my own experience is going back to each moment that I have enough attachment to, that I have memory of, and see how my interpretation was wrong, inviting ignorance in. And also remembering that there's a certain amount of, there's intelligence behind contraction, you know, repulsion, whatever you want to say. There's intelligence in all of this. There's intelligence in the 12 links. And so I'm utilizing the 12 links to now see the path towards deconstructing attachment. You know, and that's this reverse complex that we use when dealing with dependent origination. That's kind of the unwinding when you, after you've wound up this this karmic like suffering that we're all bound to, right? You can unwind that by going back and actually inviting ignorance in to see, how was I reifying in this situation? And by doing that, by going into all of these different points that kind of connect to make this, you know, I don't know, helix of experience, you know, you dissolve the image completely. And that kind of gets into and that's my notion of emptiness. Sure. But we won't go there.
Oh, you don't want to talk about emptiness
podcast. But yeah, I would say, and I think emptiness does show up in the first turning.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's I mean, we have the doctrine of Anatman in the first turning, where, right, no self, which is very clearly based on emptiness. I think emptiness, you know, takes a bigger precedent in the Mahayana in the second turning. But you can't have dependent origination without emptiness. Yeah. Because what dependent origination is saying is the thing in front of you is empty, right? Like, it doesn't exist on its own. And that's really what emptiness means in Buddhism, is that nothing is self-arising. Nothing is self-creating. And so, yes, emptiness is in this very teaching.
And so, okay, we talked about this earlier. Cooper had to call some stuff out. So we were talking about fabrication. Like, okay, I'm looking at this door, I'm looking at this jacket. I am simultaneously experiencing that and fabricating that. How do you?
Kind of.
So that's incorrect. So we don't fabricate experience. We aren't constantly creating our reality to the most gross level.
Not to the most gross level, right? Like, we will walk out of this room. We'll finish this recording. We'll walk out of this room. This room's still going to exist, right? Without you or I in it. That's just physics.
Okay.
and you know, even the Dalai Lama has said, like, where science and Buddhism meet on a like a debate of reality, Buddhism must give way to science. Physics says this room will exist. Physics also says that the existence of this room will deteriorate, which is the Buddhist teaching here.
Right.
In 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, this is going to be a slag heap of refuse and rotting wood and carpet. Because it will. Because
what does that say about the way that we're destroying our earth right now?
I mean,
anyways, but it's interesting. No, because you make a good point. Like, this room is going to exist. It's not going to exist for me. Right. It's not arising in my
it's not
my experience.
For you. It's just arising.
Right. But it's arising not separately from me
it's co-arising.
But perhaps I am not in perception. I'm not perceiving the co-arising of this room.
Yeah. Because, you know, we've got wood paneling behind you here, Gabby. And I would bet that those trees were under their causes and conditions of arising before you were under your causes and conditions of arising. That is to say, the seeds of those trees were in the ground before you were growing in your mother's womb, right?
Before I was born.
Right. So I think it's just so self-centered. And this is my thing with any religious tradition, is like, stop being so fucking self-centered, right? Like,
I'm fabricating all of this.
I'm fabricating all of this is so fucking hubristic. Like, no, I'm not fabricating shit except for my own experience.
Yeah, and I think the nuance behind it is like, like I am fabricating to the extent that I am experiencing. So the narratives that I'm living, the storyline that I'm living, the relationships that I have, the attachments that I have, that's all fabricated.
Yes.
Right.
And by you.
Right. And so I'm just curious, when does the line draw within this scale of what is dependently or what is co-arising with me, and then my own interpretation of it? Like I can look at a jacket or a tree and say that's a green tree, it has this functionality, break down the pragmatics of it. But I'm curious, like when does that become untouchable? Like when does that become co-arising instead of my own perception?
So you're asking me to give you the like rundown of Phil Stanley's The Mind in Its World class, because that was also hell. That class class is painful.
Got it. Love you, Phil Stanley.
Oh yeah, Phil's incredible. No. He's one of my favorite instructors of all time. It's just the concepts in that class are painful. So, but we can do this because it does relate to the 12 links. So Buddhism says that you have 6 sense organs. The 5 that we think of in the Western world: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and you smell.
Okay.
Eyes, ears, nose,
tongue. Sorry.
And touch. There we go. But it also says that you have a 6th one, the mind. Now, so these are called the 18 dhatus. So the 18 dhatus are the 18 like ways by which things arise, or the 18 sense organs and their sense intelligences and their sense objects. You have eyes, and we'll just make it really simple here. You have eyes. They are, to the best of my knowledge, except for maybe you need glasses, but they are what we would call functional sense organs. And this can sound really shitty and sort of dismissive to people with disabilities, and I don't mean it that way. This is just the traditional language. If you have color blindness, for example, the traditional language says that you have a non-functioning sense organ, right? And I don't mean that dismissively. Just like it's not functioning in the way that we consider standard,
right?
And whether or not we should consider it standard, that's a different conversation, right? So you have eyes. They work. They see color. They see shape. All of this. So you see a sign. The teaching is that your eyes do not have the option to not see the color. Blue will arise if that sign is blue. It must. Okay. Then you have the sort of the sense mind. So you have the part of your brain, if you will, that is responsible for interpreting that color. And you also have the object you're perceiving. So these 3 things must all be there for something to arise, like in your mind, at least.
So taking this into relationships now.
Right. You must have another person or another object. If we're talking relationally with objects, you must come into contact with it via a sense organ. And that sense organ must send feedback to its receptive like mind. And that doesn't mean that what you're perceiving is accurate. We have different types of cognition. We have valid cognition and non-valid cognition, and then there's actually even more breakdowns than that, but let's just go with valid and non-valid cognition here. So you perceive me a certain way because of how I sound, how I look, how I smell, how I feel when you hug me, right? Like, and some of those perceptions are valid, as in true to what is, capital I is. And some of them are invalid because you're wrong sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Cooper's actually a dumbass.
Correct.
Like
Correct. Now Gabby knows. Like, now it's a valid perception.
Interesting. Okay, so this makes me think of Carl Jung and the collective unconscious.
Yeah,
and
I guess.
I mean, no, it just makes me think because, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, the collective unconscious is something that's present, that we have the ability to perceive, but in trying to perceive, we are incorrect in perceiving it.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I've never read Carl Jung.
Never read Carl Jung?
I refuse to. Everybody's always like, Jung's so great. Look at these archetypes. And so I refuse on principle.
Oh my gosh, Cooper.
See, I'm
we
not
disagree
smart
about these kinds of things.
I'm not smart.
Martin Buber? No.
No, not a
Oh,
Buber
come
fan.
on.
Give me Weber all the way. No, but I think that, you know, we can talk about the collective unconscious and we can talk about referent objects. So, for example, if I say table, something appears in your mind.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we would call a referent object.
Right.
It probably is wooden, at least it is for me in my mind. It has 4 legs. It stands about, 4 feet tall.
Right. So taking this more psychologically now, like if you
Mhm.
say something like some kind of trigger word,
Mhm.
fat,
Right.
you know,
If we have
stupid.
an image.
Right.
But the thing about a referent object is that it's just a referent. It doesn't actually represent every table.
So what about a referent, of course, but what about a referent emotion? What about,
Oh yeah, I mean,
you know, like, so
come
that
on.
has,
I say anger. I say anger. What's the first thing that comes to your head?
God, I don't know.
No. Just like seriously, clear your mind for a second.
Okay, clear my mind.
Anger.
So
Yeah, I saw it on your face though.
I mean, probably being lied to.
Okay,
Yeah.
see, for you, it's being lied to. That's a thing that makes you angry. I
Totally.
think anger, and I see the color red. I feel the tension in my stomach, like I'm getting ready to fist fight, right? The same word doesn't mean the same thing to us because the emotion's completely different.
Right. And so you can't pinpoint emotion.
No.
Because it arises differently for all of us.
Mhm.
But though the emotion may exist, now how does that work, right? Because we have like, oh, this is a rising room. This room is arising. Is the emotion arising?
Mm-hmm. The emotion is arising from causes and conditions. So it's
But
arising...
it's a different texture of emotion.
Sure.
And so we all understand emotions differently, though they have commonalities between them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, then it gets really technical with how you can break down emotional
Mm-hmm.
landscapes.
I mean, yeah, we could go all the way to Vajrayana and talk about the Buddha families if we wanted to with emotional landscapes.
Right.
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 But as far as like the actual arising, it's the same thing. We have the mind as a sense organ. I've lost Gabby.
No, I'm looking at you on the screen.
we have the mind as a sense organ, and it interprets something that someone says. If I say, Gabby, I fucking hate you, right? Like that's going to cause some anger if I say it in seriousness, because actually 2 sense organs are at play here. The mind, which is perceiving thought,
And the ears.
Yeah. Right? And so those things coupled with their mind, their sense mind, perceive what happens and have a reaction to it. That reaction arises based on the causes, right? Our relationship up to this point and the words I've just said. Okay? And your own past, your own reaction to things that people may or may not say to you.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that comes into play. The emotions arise, and then you have an option. This is the real core teaching to end suffering in Buddhism, is that something arises and you have an emotional reaction. Buddhism doesn't say you can stop the emotional reaction. Okay, that's a misinterpretation. What Buddhism says is you have a moment to choose what to do with that emotional reaction. And I think every wisdom tradition says this, right? Like Christianity says, don't sin in your heart, which is like, don't let the negative thoughts take you over. So if anger arises, you can take a moment, take a breath. Okay, here's where the anger is in my stomach. I'm going to loosen that tension. Okay.
And then you kind of dissolve it completely.
It stops existing.
Right. I mean, I do that when I'm like, sitting in meditation or you're uncomfortable. Like this can go into the most gross physical places. Like I'm running 10 miles and my knees hurt.
Yep.
Can I go into my knee? Can I see, okay, can I think about where is this coming from in my knee, in my quad? Like, and eventually it kind of dissolves. And I don't know if that's a placebo effect or if that's just the nature of reality and it's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fascinating. And I think to kind of round it off, we're talking about dependent origination. We're talking about Buddhism. We're talking about the really crazy nuances behind how you can interact with this teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what is the core message here? right? The core message is to watch your reactions and that you have a choice.
Yeah.
You can choose. And I think that's something that we lose in the translation of traditions and religion. It's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but you have the responsibility to create your own heaven on earth.
Yes, but I want to take that with a grain of salt, right? Because sometimes people hear this like this teaching of Buddhism that, you know, if we can just sort of accept the world exactly as it is, which is sort of the core teaching of Buddhism, then we won't suffer. And think, well, then you're saying like abuse victims should just accept the abuse exactly as it is, right? At a very slippery slope end, you know? And I want to be hesitant or careful around this languaging, right? If we can watch what is arising and say this is arising exactly as it is, we can have an honest and healthy response to it.
Or a reorientation towards the real.
Yeah.
Towards truth.
Yeah.
Totally. And I see that. And I think that being truthful and real with yourself is the responsibility.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm pointing to.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, we get wrapped up in dogma, we get wrapped up in like the teachings and this verse and that verse and whatever it may be. But I think it's important to recognize that we have choice.
Yes.
I think.
We
have choice. We have choice to create how we want to identify with things and how real we make our contractions, you know? And so taking up the responsibility of you have to curate, what does liberation look like for you? You know, and I've said this before, like the Buddha was a trailblazer. He took from so many different traditions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yogis, Brahmanical sources, like the influence, Sufism and yoga, you know, there's so much cross-pollination.
Yep.
But these are ascetics that are looking for their own version of liberation. And the Buddha just happened to nail it on the head for him. Right? And he landed on some truths that I feel like we can arrive at ourselves via paying attention to what is arising.
Right.
But that doesn't speak for it being the only way.
Sure.
And this is where the interspiritual context of it all kind of comes together. Like we have access to, you know, homie who's all the way across the world in like Southeast Asia, right? I could call him up right now.
Yes, yeah.
And so having that exposure, there's almost like this new turning of religion in general that's happening. Yeah. And so I find that fascinating. And I find it fascinating to see how we can relate this teaching, dependent origination, to all of that and how it still applies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have this sort of commingling of tradition without all of the things that had to arise for that, without airplanes, without, you know, trade, without wars,
without slavery,
right,
without some of the darkest aspects of humanity,
right,
you know. And I think that it's so, I mean, it's so crazy to have to think about that, you know, like I am here because my ancestors were enslaved,
right,
you know,
right, and I'm here because my ancestors fled oppression and became oppressors.
Yeah.
Like that's all part of it.
Right. And so, I mean, that's the work. And it's something that I've said before, like love has no heart, you know, and the same thing can be applied here. Like reality, it has no polarity, you know?
It just is.
It just is. Yeah. It's interesting. But thank you for joining me for this conversation.
Yes.
Anything you want to like say to like really wrap this up and tie it with the bow?
Tie up the bow. You know, I guess we can just say as we go forward in our day-to-day, and then as we're dealing with things, but also dealing with inner spirituality, we just have to be mindful, I would say, that no person is arriving the way we perceive them. No tradition is arriving the way it looks on its face. And until we can take a moment, a deep breath, and actually think about the causes and conditions that are dragging us all into this moment, we're going to keep suffering.
And then in being real with these causes and conditions, like realize that you don't know everything.
No.
I don't know shit.
I don't know shit.
I don't know shit.
You know,
You can say
it's
whatever
Aristotle,
you want.
right? Which Greek was it?
Plato?
Plato, yes. I know nothing except that I know nothing. It's
Yeah.
like, that's, if we could all just start there, we'd be a lot happier.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for slipping into this conversation somehow based off of your causes and conditions.
Exactly.
Are there any places that, you know, you want to shout out in terms of your contacts or anything like that?
No, nobody needs to find me. I'm not.
We'll
important.
probably be doing this again though.
Yeah.
This is the Spirit Meets Soil podcast. So a lot going on there. I started a dialogue series, which is pretty great, and I would love to pick it up maybe here. And my Instagram is gabriella.x.espinoza, I think. I don't know, I just changed it. But aside from that, appreciate all of the listeners, appreciate you, Yovel, for everything. And I think it can sign off.
All right.
Cheers.